Ivabradine is a medication used to treat chest pain and systolic heart failure, and it is especially useful in patients who cannot take beta blockers. Examiners love to ask about cardiac drugs as a way to test you on cardiac physiology, and Ivabradine's unique mechanism makes it one to know for your exam. In this video, we'll review the key associations that you need to know in order to nab a few easy points on test day. Speaking of chest pain, nothing gives me angina quite like ivory poachers. Yeah, that's right. This scene takes place in Africa, where our safari has stumbled across a poacher in search of ivory beads. Now that I think of it, ivory beads sounds a lot like Ivabradine, doesn't it? This poacher was looking for an easy payday with his stolen loot, but it looks like his partner has stumbled into a patch of quicksand. The quicksand is here to symbolize decreased rate, which is Ivabradine's main effect on the heart. I mean, just look at that poacher. His rate has been decreased dramatically. This should remind you that Ivabradine manages to decrease the heart rate of patients while still maintaining their contractility. This is a unique property of Ivabradine, and it is the single most important thing to remember about this drug. So when you think of the mechanism of action, just remember this poacher trapped in quicksand. While he can't move fast, he is still able to work by carrying that ivory slung over his shoulder. It looks like the sight of the poacher's misfortunes is a point of amusement amongst the wildlife. Don't worry, poacher, he's laughing at you, not with you. Let this laughing baboon remind you of funny channels. Get it? Because laughing is pretty funny, right? Ivabradine works by inhibiting cardiac funny channels, which is ultimately how it slows the heart rate. Let's take this opportunity to do a quick review of the pacemaker action potential in the heart. The heart is able to beat on its own by the action potentials produced in the SA node. Specifically, the funny channels are what determines how quickly these action potentials occur. The funny channels allow for sodium to enter the cell while potassium leaks out. However, for simplicity, let's focus only on the sodium. The more sodium that flows through the funny channel and into the cardiac cell, the faster the cell will depolarize. This is because sodium is positively charged, and the cell typically has a negative charge at baseline. This is illustrated here by a steeper slope of phase 4 of the action potential. This increased depolarization and steeper slope ultimately lead to an increased heart rate. Conversely, when a drug like Ivabradine slows the flow of sodium ions across the membrane, the slope of phase 4 becomes more shallow. The shallower slope means that it takes longer to reach the threshold for depolarization, and this means that the heart contracts less often. So, heart rate decreases, but only the heart rate. There is no effect on the strength of each contraction. The phrase to remember is that Ivabradine affects chronotropy without affecting inotropy, but this should make sense if you remember what funny channels do. So, when you think about Ivabradine, remember this laughing baboon and you'll remember the blocked funny channels that allow the medication to decrease heart rate. Next, let's quickly review some clinical indications. Ivabradine can be used for chronic stable angina and in systolic heart failure patients who cannot take beta blockers. Like beta blockers, Ivabradine slows the heart rate. However, unlike beta blockers, Ivabradine does not decrease the contractility of the heart. This is because Ivabradine does not inhibit the beta-1 receptors, which also affect the heart's contractility. Remember, Ivabradine only blocks funny channels. Slowing the heart rate decreases the work that the heart has to do and therefore reduces the heart muscle's need for oxygen. This is helpful for angina and heart failure alike. Especially keep Ivabradine in mind for those patients with heart failure with a reduced ejection fraction. Slowing their heart rate without diminishing their already poor contractility is ideal. Okay, one of the poachers got what he deserved, but what about that other one? It looks like he is inspecting those precious ivory beads with a flashlight. I guess he wants to make sure his stolen ivory is up to its usual quality. You know, now that I see that, the light from the poacher's flashlight is the perfect symbol for the luminous phenomenon which is commonly associated with Ivabradine. A luminous phenomenon is just a fancy way to say a feeling of enhanced brightness in the visual field, just like this flashlight is really enhancing the brightness of those ivory beads. It's thought that the luminous phenomenon is caused by Ivabradine inhibiting an ion channel in the retina that resembles the funny channel. Makes sense, right? Before we finish up, I want to mention one other adverse effect. This is obvious, but we need to mention it. Ivabradine can cause bradycardia. Now, if you've been paying attention at all, this should make perfect sense. We use Ivabradine to slow patients' heart rates, so the fact that slowed heart rate is a side effect should seem pretty obvious. Alright, that's all for this image. Let's wrap up. Ivabradine decreases heart rate without affecting the heart's contractility. It works by decreasing sodium flow across funny channels, which decreases SA node firing and subsequently slows the heart rate. Since it does not affect inotropy, it can be used to treat angina and systolic heart failure in patients who can't be on beta blockers. Adverse effects include a luminous phenomenon, which is caused by inhibition of ion channels in the retina that resemble funny channels. Okay, that is all. Now let's get out of here before the poachers see us.